Juri Laurènt on Zoom. Morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Now, we should tell everybody, we actually know each other from, a few years back. And it was one of those funny things where, when we started to reach out, I went, hang on a second. I know this person.
I was like, should I tell him? When should I tell you?
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is all very exciting though, right? Because,
Yeah.
going back a few years ago, I do remember, when you were, looking to establish yourself a little bit more in the music world, and you had these musical projects that were starting to develop, and now here you are, part of the Rhema playlist. So, let's go back to those kind of maybe early days, a few years back. I mean, admittedly, I'm sure you've been, playing for much longer than that, but what's the journey been like to get to where you are now with, you got songs on the radio here, and a few years ago, did you see this coming?
Um, I had always hoped and dreamed that that would be where my music would go. But it's funny you talk about those early years because I have been writing and recording for quite some time. And I, as an artist, as a musician, you write about experiences in your life. You write about there's a lot of healing and cathartic outlet you get in writing. But I looked back over the catalogue of material and I realized that they all carried a very similar theme of heartbreak, lack of worth, fear, anxiety, depression, regret, self-loathing, you name it. Like, I was writing about all these things, and whilst it was a really important outlet for me to have, and those those works are still relevant, I realized that God was not evident in that music or in those lyrics.
Wow.
And yeah, and whilst he has always been present in my thoughts, and whilst I have always given him the glory for any inspiration I've had, and I always thought that, because they say that your talent is God's gift to you, and what you do with it is your gift back to God. And I always thought that just by doing something with this music in general was honoring him. But I really realized that he was not evident in my music, and it wouldn't have been obvious to anyone else listening to that music or reading those lyrics.
So, so was there a moment though where you just that kind of came to you at once, or was it like a staggered realization over a period of days, weeks, months, or years?
No, it literally was like a light bulb moment where it kind of just hit me.
Wow.
It literally was like, what have I been doing? Where have I been? How have I somehow managed to miss this fundamental, like, glaringly obvious thing that's missing?
But it's a funny that you say that too, because I mean, I notice how easy it is. I mean, look, I'm in Christian broadcasting, right? I'm up to my eyeballs in this stuff. And it's amazing how often I notice, for example, you're talking to somebody and they say, oh, I'm not feeling too well. And we say things like, oh, that's a shame. As if like, oh, I could pray for you. Like I could do something. You could so easily
Yeah.
get into that mode of doing what you do. So I can absolutely see how, you're using your gifts, you feel like you're on the path, and then you suddenly realize maybe I haven't involved God as much as he would like to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for me too, you go through life sometimes and you feel like you're living life right. You feel like you're going to church and you're going to the groups and you're connecting. I realized a much I realized a hunger to want to know God a lot more, and it changed the way I pursued him, being a considerably more intentional in reading the Bible, giving my time to him a lot more intentionally rather than incidentally. When you're driving somewhere, it's like
Sure,
actually
sure.
giving God time. And it was I mean, the whole thing of draw near to God and he will draw near to you. I think it was just a culmination of me getting to that point of wanting so much more depth in my relationship with him that, yeah, I looked back and it became so incredibly obvious, like, that he was missing in one of the most important factors. Well, he wasn't missing in that because there are still threads of God in my music, but it just wasn't obvious.
Yeah.
And I just really wanted to be super loud and super public about him. And it's weird because in a way, in my mind, I almost don't even refer to them as Christian songs or worship songs. I just refer to them as songs for God. It's
Mm.
it's me almost like directly writing to him about, well, especially the two songs that you have. They're very much almost like letters to God about, actually, I'm so sorry about that. And after all these things, you were here all along anyway. And yeah, just very personal love letters to him, I guess.
Well, look, we've got plenty of time to talk about some of these songs as well and what your musical journey has been like today. But let's play one of those songs now. So I've lined up Higher Still. We're going to play that right now. So can you tell me a little bit about the story behind this one?
Yes. So Higher Still very much is about that place where you haven't really been living your life right, but God's still loving me, even though I think one of the lyrics in there is, even though my bones were vagrant. And you think about the many ways as humans that we break his heart and fall, but you call on him and he meets us at our lowest points and ultimately brings us back to the summit. And definitely me realizing that I don't need the love of the world. I only need his perfect love.
Amazing message, an amazing
Yeah.
song. Here it is from Juri Laurènt this morning. This is Higher Still. Beautiful song, Juri Laurènt there. That is Higher. Love the strings in that, by the way, Juri. How did you bring all that together?
I have a fantastic producer that I work with, and we just sat in the studio, and it was really incredible because he's worked with me before on a lot of my older material, and so bringing this style of music to him with this theme, um, he was so on board with the
Mm.
vision and where it was at. So yeah, he did a great job.
Well, let's talk about then what it means to be a musician and especially one that's leading so heavily into their faith and their music now, as we were sharing about beforehand. What has the journey been like for you over the last few years? Many have found it fairly tumultuous, and then, of course, life throws its own surprises at us as well. So how are you finding a creative outlet? What is it like to be a musician in Aotearoa in 2025?
Um, Look, I can only speak for myself here. It's actually it's hard. I mean, I think in a lot of ways, depending on your social networks and connection, for me, I found I've had to pivot a little bit.
Mm.
I met the love of my life. We got married. We bought a house, and so financially, there were a few constraints when it came to the available funds to throw at recording music and things like that.
It's
And
an
I
expensive
found that a
hobby.
bit of a personal. I found that a bit of a personal challenge, and so I had to really think. Okay, so how do I do this then? What do you wanting me to do? What is he wanting me to do? And I've always shied away from live stuff, which sounds really silly. It's not my comfort zone, but I went to church, or I was always going to church anyway, but I went with the heart of, okay, is there a need there for me to potentially be on the worship team? So I've been singing live on the worship team, and it has been a phenomenal experience for me. And I'm still absolutely writing. But then we're about to welcome our first child as well. He's due in July.
Yes,
And
congratulations. That's wonderful.
thank you. And so he's actually stolen a lot of the focus and a lot of the limelight of our, immediate future.
Yeah.
But I would like to think that during a period of maternity leave, that I would be able to have some space to
Mm.
really dive back into picking up the guitar again and writing those lyrics. And you don't always have to um, go via the route of recording and releasing. There are so many other ways in which you can get your music out there.
Mm.
And I'm really excited about how to pursue that. And I know that when the time is right, God will allow me to get the music back recorded again.
Yeah.
So yeah, there is definitely stuff still coming.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting too how your different life circumstances start to inform the music that you create, and you notice different things as well. Are you the
Yeah.
kind of person who, do you maybe like have a notebook on hand when an idea comes to you, or like how do you capture these moments so that maybe you can revisit them when you've got a bit of songwriting space later on?
So our smartphones are wonderful things. I if we didn't have those, I did used to actually walk around with a notebook, and I actually used to walk around with a little handheld recorder. So now, honestly, I might be driving somewhere, I might have to pull over, whip out the little recording option on my phone, record a little lyric, record a little melody. The notepad function on my phone is full of lots of little notes and
Mm.
thoughts and things like that. So you definitely capturing it as I go. But it's amazing how our brain can sometimes store things and then just release it a little bit later, because sometimes if I'm in a meeting or something, I can't just capture it. So I'm like, okay, I trust that I'm going to file it away somewhere and it's going to come out.
Yeah. That's so cool. And so when you are, looking to make your way then as a musician, and it still, as you say, you've got a mortgage to pay now and all those sorts of things.
Yeah.
We've spoken to a few artists already about how you kind of balance, whether or not you can do the music full time or whether or not you need to sustain it through other things, and maybe how you even make sure the music doesn't become a burden to you as well. Because maybe when it takes on that extra weight of this has to support me now as well, it can affect your
Yeah.
creative flow. What's been that journey like for you, trying to find that balance of how to fit that creative spark into, having to buy groceries and pay the mortgage?
Yep. So for me, I really do look at God's hand in this and how he wants to use me. And for sure, like sometimes you can think, gosh, what where are you taking me with this? What do you want from me with this? I obviously can't do it like I used to. How are you using me now? And I think for me, it's just always maintaining that positive outlook that, you know what, God's timing is always perfect. And for me, it's about, actually, sometimes taking on a side hustle as well,
Yeah.
just to put a little bit aside for your music. But for me, when that heaviness kicks in, where you feel a little bit like, gosh, I don't know how long I can sustain this for, and feeling like I can't have that outlet, you just park it for a little bit.
Wow.
Just put it down and have a little break, have a little mental break, a little mind break, and then sure enough, the motivation and those desires and that feeling comes back in a flood, and then you think of all these other different ways that you can pursue it that you might not have thought about before. So sometimes when you are feeling hard pressed, and you can't just do the easy thing that you used to always do, you just get really creative with what your other options are, and there's something so inspiring about that as well.
Wow, there is some real wisdom in that. I love it because you're right. We tend to genuinely, I think we genuinely. Well, I mean, I'll say it for myself. Used to fall into a pattern of, it's almost like, you've got this problem up in front of you, like you're holding it in your hand and you're turning it around in different angles, and what does it look like from the top and from the bottom and the other side, and ultimately you're just obsessing over the same thing. To be able to put it down and then kind of come back to it later, I think, the faith step in that is that you really are leaving room for God to maybe illuminate something you hadn't seen. So when you do pick it up again, you notice maybe a facet that you hadn't noticed, even though you thought you'd turned the problem over 100 times.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, you suddenly there's an avenue that you haven't thought of pursuing before, because you haven't needed to, and then it becomes glaringly obvious after you've just laid it down for a bit and prayed about it.
That's incredible. Well, Juri, we so look forward to more music from you at whatever time in the future your newborn allows. We'll give you a few months off for that one, I think. Seems fair.
Thank you.
But before we go, we do have Where I'll Lie on our playlist as well from you. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what that song's about before we wrap things up this morning?
Yep, absolutely. So where I'll lie, it's about situations in my life where, again, we're talking about feeling like you're trapped or you're up against it and you're not really seeing his hand. Well, I didn't feel like I could see his hand. But in that realization, I'm understanding that actually maybe I've wandered off the path a little. Maybe I'm not as pressed in as I was, in my humanness. I've allowed myself to be burdened by these worldly thoughts. And yeah, it's just that moment where you realize that he is always there. He has always held me. He has always kept me safe. And it was just me that needed to press in and honor that and realize that.
Wow, it's not about where God's gone, but maybe it's about where I've gone,
Yes.
right?
Exactly.
Juri, absolute pleasure, and great to reconnect with you too, by the way.
Yeah, you too.
So we'll make sure we don't leave you a few years next time. For now, though, this is Juri Laurènt, Where I'll Lie. Oh, before we go, Julie, if people want to follow along with your music or keep up to date with you, best channels for them to do so, where can they find you?
They can find me on Instagram under Juri Laurènt, and also on Facebook under Juri Laurènt, and also on Spotify under Juri Laurènt.
There you go. Juri Laurènt, everywhere you look. Amazing. I hope you enjoyed that as much as we did.
Yeah, don't forget to like and subscribe and turn your notifications on so you don't miss the next video.
We'll see you in the next one.